Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Deciding to Soar, Living Life Your Own Way. My name is SharRon Jamison, and I am a life strategist, a corporate leader, a minister, and a mom. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. I am so grateful that you are here. This is an unedited, unscripted space where I share what I'm learning in my own life as well as what I am learning from working with so many amazing leaders, entrepreneurs, visionaries, healers, and people, brave souls, just like you. And today I want to ask you a question about who are you getting advice from? Who are you getting advice from? And this question came up because I have been working with so many amazing people who I believe are receiving advice that may not speak to the reality and the complexities of their lives, of their relationships, and the lives of their careers. And something that I learned long ago from my elders is a proverb that says, you see based on where you sit. You see based on where you sit. And that proverb is a reminder that we all sit in different seats. Metaphorically, we sit in seats around our race. We sit in different seats around our gender. We occupy different seats around our life experiences, our culture, our financial status, our educational level. We sit in different seats around our language, around our historical norms, around our systemic oppression. We sit in seats around our legacies. We sit in seats based on our gifts, our talents, our abilities, our how we navigate in the world. We sit in seats around our age and any other type of generational shifts or impact that inform or shape what we see. And if you think about it, before we even have our coffee in the morning, we all exist in around 20 seats. 20 seats from being in a partnership, being a parent, being a person who exercises, a whole bunch of seats that influence and inform how we see the world, how we live in the world, how we navigate in the world, as well as how the world sees us, how the world treats us, how the world embraces us. And when we receive advice, I believe that we all not only deserve, but we benefit from advice that speaks to the seats that we occupy, that speaks to the reality of our lives, so that we have advice that can be fruitful, that can be specific, that can help us be productive and efficient as we navigate based on the seats that we live in and the seats that we carry throughout our lives. Now, you might say, SharRon, why is that important? I want you to think about 4 important concepts about advice. Here's the first one. Even though some concepts are universal, there are practice in context. Even though some concepts are universal, concepts like integrity, courage, humility, tenacity, patience, norms, identity, Those might be concepts that are universal, right? We think they are, but how they are practiced, how they're experienced based on context. For example, how I experience equality as a Black, able-bodied woman over 60 may be very different than a person who experiences it as a white person, a male, a person who's in their 20s, a person who's just starting off in their career, a person who may have moved here from another country, person who might not be as able-bodied. All those types of things will make all those words like culture and courage and humility, all that those words have to be will be understood in context. And so that's why we have to understand that everybody doesn't see what we see, and everybody doesn't see how we see based on where they sit, because perspectives are always situated based on the seats that you convey in life. Again, things may be universal, but they're experienced in context, because context is based on where you are situated in your life. The second thing is important to understand is that any advice that you receive that ignores the reality and the complexities and the contradictions of your life might be advice that can prove harmful or create more barriers for you. Let's talk about that for a moment. I know when I receive advice from a white male about how to navigate in corporate America, I know that the same advice to speak up in a certain way might be conveyed or accepted as a white male being assertive, being a leader. If I do the same, take the same advice and do the same way and behave in the same way, people would say that I am, as a Black woman, I'm being aggressive, I'm being confrontational. So I know that same advice that I receive has to be listened and evaluated through the seats that I occupy to make sure that the advice that I receive is helpful. For example, another example, advice if you are a parent and somebody is not a parent, advice that you might give to a person who is not able-bodied and you're able-bodied. How about some advice that you are a 60-year-old and you're telling someone who is 22 years old how to handle their career, how to be a leader. I think we have to understand that there are differences and honor those differences, not from a perspective of superiority, but from a place of empathy and understanding. If not, we run the risk of diminishing a person and diminishing the unique experience that they have in the world. Let's take another example for like faith. We know that straight people may feel that they get to experience the beauty of a faith community or faith tradition. But we also know that many of our LGBTQ plus community, they might experience the brutality of a faith community and a faith tradition. And so we need to understand, yes, they might read the same book, they might attend the same services, might be part of the same denominations, but they can have very different experiences because they occupy different seats around sexual identity and sexual orientation. And so we need to understand that, of course, yes, there's beauty in faith, but many faith traditions have a history and a practice of exclusion, of dehumanizing people, of demonizing people and making people who are LGBTQ plus feel that they are not worthy of God, that they are not worthy of having access to the faith communities, which in my perspective is not true, because God loves us all. That's my perspective, right? And that's my belief. And so we need to understand that as a straight minister or straight spiritual leader, that people might see your experiences very differently. It doesn't make them wrong. It makes them have a different sight, a different perspective, because they are sitting in different situations. And if we give advice to people when they are different, when they are excluded, when they are demonized, when they are marginalized, without understanding their situations, their reality, and listening deeply and learning consistently and having an open mind, an open heart, and open spirit, we commit injustice to them. And we can consequently give them wrong advice, give them bad feedback, and give them insensitive wisdom that undermines who they are and can impact their overall wellness and their quality of life. So we've got to be clear. And that goes again across all the different seats. I'll give you another example. When we talk about risk, I see many people who come from affluent cultures talk about risk, financial risk, very differently than people who come from people who grew up in financial lack. And I find that people who come from money who are very condemning of people who come from humble beginnings financially of not taking risk. Is that fair? Because you don't know their experiences. You don't know what lack feels like. You don't know what it took for them to survive without resources. So we have to be careful that we don't take our perspectives and heap judgment on people who make different decisions and different choices because they have different histories, different realities, different circumstances that they navigate day to day. So that's why we have to be careful that you don't accept or invite people in your life to give you advice, to speak into your life, if they don't have a commitment to understanding the complexities and realities of your life. People can't come to you and offer you advice with a whole bunch of assumptions. I see that a lot in therapy. I see that a lot with coaches who come with this global perspective and this general understanding that refuses to take into consideration the specific circumstances of a person's life. And those are the coaches and healers that I hope that you will stay away from, because you deserve someone who wants to and is encouraged to you and motivated to give you feedback, wisdom, and advice based on the specific circumstances of your life. Yeah. The third thing I want to say is to remember that you don't need identical people to you, but you need people who are interested in being informed about you. I'll say that again. You don't need identical people who look like you to give you advice, but you do need people who are willing to be informed about you and to continue to be informed about you, to give you advice, give you feedback, to give you insight about your life, about your career, about your marriage, about your partnership, about how to be a parent, how to be an entrepreneur. I think it's really important that we realize if people are not willing to be informed about you and informed about your circumstances, if they're not interested about studying deeply, listening deeply, and asking questions and approaching you with a level of curiosity and asking you questions to challenge their own assumptions, are they really interested and worthy of speaking into your life? A person who refuses to learn about your lived experience is a person who has not earned the right to give you insight about your life experience. So I just want you to think about that. And so I think it's important that you and I are always considering and asking ourselves, do the seats that my advisors sit in, do they give them vision into the variables that I navigate every day? Do the seats that the healers who are working with me sit in, does that give them insight into how I interpret my life every day? Are the leaders that I trust to speak into me spiritually, do they have the willingness to learn so that they don't limit me based on their assumptions and their prejudice? Another question might be, we have to ask ourselves, when we get advice, are we evaluating the advice or accepting the advice? Because advisors can unintentionally miss variables about your life, about your reality, because nobody knows everything, right? But if they're not asking you questions to gain insights about the places that the seats that they don't sit in, are the perspectives that they don't understand, are they the people who should be speaking to your life? And I say that as a person who I have had many mentors try to give me advice that did not understand my reality as a Black woman in leadership, who did not understand my reality as a progressive minister, a female minister in the church movement or in the community. So those are things we have to understand, because some people might be unintentionally missing out on understanding your life and giving you bad advice, not on purpose, but out of ignorance. That's why it's important to us. The fourth thing is to remember that we should build a table of advisors and not put people on pedestals as advisors. I'll say that again. We should build a table of different types of advisors who sit in the seats that we occupy financially, emotionally, around our race, our sex, our marriage status, our goals, our dreams. We need a table of advisors, and we need to stop putting people on pedestals. Tables versus pedestals. Because when we put people on pedestals, we invite them to give us feedback and give us advice based on things that they might not understand, things that they might not know, things that they might not take the initiative to learn. And so we are idolizing ignorance versus getting people who love us, who care about us, who care about the complexities of our lives. And we forfeit the opportunity for customized, specific wisdom. Because the truth is, even if 5 people are going to the same destination, all 5 people might require a different navigation to get to the same destination. I will say that again. Even if 5 people are going to the same destination, they might require 5 different paths of navigation to get to the destination, because they all occupy seats that not only inform who they are, but inform how society treats them and embraces them and requires them, unfortunately, to navigate to the destination. And the destination could be a great partnership, a great parent, opportunity, a good business, a good career, whatever that is. We have to know that there are differences. And we have to know that people to give you advice must earn, and I want you to circle that word, the opportunity to speak in your advice and speak into your life by having the same lived experience, by study, by observation, by listening, by researching, by their own coaching, so they see where they might not have access to different parts of your life. They need to have wisdom that is contextual wisdom, because all advice is not good advice. And any advice that doesn't help you be who you were born to be, any advice that does not help you interpret the world that you're navigating in ways that keep you well, healthy, and whole, is not supportive advice. So make sure that you are seeking advisors who can give you advice that does not ignore your reality, that does not ignore your barriers to hurdles, that does not ignore the complexities of your life. Because many of us sit in a lot of different seats, and we all have a job to do. We all have a calling, a purpose. We all have goals and dreams. We all have something that we have been called to do by our own Creator. And sometimes the people don't understand the road that you're traveling. And if you receive advice that does not honor all of who you are, that advice is not hopeful, it's not helpful, and it's not healing. So today I want you to think about the advice that you are receiving. I want you to think about your advisors, to make sure they occupy some of the seats that you sit in. Again, they don't have to be identical to you, but they have to be willing to be informed about you. And if this podcast resonates with you, please listen and listen over again and evaluate who's at your table, and evaluate to make sure you're not putting people on pedestals. And then share the podcast with other people who need advice. And then join us on YouTube and leave a comment. If you leave a comment or leave a question, I will do my best to answer your question as completely and thoroughly as I can. And I always want to invite you to the mailing list, because I would love for you to join the community of mailers where I send out additional insight in our community through our mailing list. And I want to invite you to join that community. So just remember that your purpose doesn't change, your potential doesn't change, your destination doesn't change, your gifts and talents don't change, but the strategy that you need to be successful and reach the highest good will change, because every person in the world, every person is navigating different realities, different opportunities, different barriers, different responsibilities, and different systems, because everybody is sitting in different seats, metaphorically, and we all see based on where we sit. So today I want to leave a benediction to you as you are considering the seats that you sit in, and also considering who can advise you based on the seats that they are sitting in. And also we can ask ourselves who's missing from the seats that you need to help you as you navigate through life. And I want to leave you with this benediction. And this is something that I tell myself that I hope will speak to you. May you find voices that speak to your personhood, your purpose, and your reality. May you recognize the difference between advice that is intentional and advice that is well informed. May you create a table filled with people whose wisdom helps you navigate your unique journey with courage, discernment, and hope. And may you remember the seats that you sit in and honor those seats. And remember, those seats affect and influence what you see. And also remind you to honor the seats of others. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. I hope this episode blesses you. Remember, you see based on where you sit, but most of all, remember to dare to soar higher in the seats that you sit in, because the best is still yet to come. Thanks so much again for your time, and blessings to you always.